As we do with every meeting, we start with a reading of the Code of Conduct that the NALC Executive Council has adopted. NALC is committed to providing an environment free from discrimination and harassment, regardless of an individual's race, ethnicity, religion, color, sex, age, national origin, sexual orientation, disability, gender identity or expression, ancestry, pregnancy, or any other characteristic prohibited by law. We ask you to embrace our values of equity and equality and conduct yourselves accordingly. This meeting as a designated individual is the first point of contact for anyone who feels they have experienced discriminatory, harassing, or otherwise unacceptable behavior. We urge you to contact them if you have any concerns. The designee for today's session is Lisa Cott. Lisa, stand up. Her email address is ebkott@nalc.org. It's now my pleasure to introduce to you a lot of the people that are sitting on the stage and here in the front of the room that devote their duties full-time to working for letter carriers and making our union go. I'll begin with the Executive Council that's seated on stage. Your Executive Vice President, Paul Barner. Vice President, James Henry. Secretary-Treasurer, Nicole Ryan. Assistant Secretary-Treasurer, Mac Julian. Unfortunately, Brother Chris Jackson was unable to attend as he is dealing with a illness in his family. I ask you to keep Brother Jackson and his family in your thoughts and prayers. Director of Safety and Health, Manny Peralta. Director of Retired Members, Dan Toth. Director of Health Benefits, Stephanie Stewart. Director of Life Insurance, Jim Yates. The Chair of the Board of Trustees, Brother Larry Brown, was also unable to attend. Brother Brown was unable to attend because he is being honored locally in an event that was planned long before this wrap session. Trustees, Sandy Lamel. Trustee, Charlie Heege. National Business Agent, Region 2, Nick Vafiatis. National Business Agent, Region 3, Mike Cariff. National Business Agent, Region 4, Dan Versluis. National Business Agent, Region 5, David Teagarden. National Business Agent, Region 6, David Mudd. Region 7, National Business Agent Patrick Johnson was not able to attend, unfortunately, to attend a funeral of a close friend. Region 8, National Business Agent Steve Lassen was not able to attend due to a minor medical procedure. Everything is okay with Steve. He was just recovering and not able to travel for a short period of time. Region 9, National Business Agent Eddie Davidson. National Business Agent Region 10, Sean Boyd. National Business Agent Region 11, Mark Camilli. National Business Agent Region 12, Brian Thompson. National Business Agent Region 13, Veda Preston. National Business Agent Region 14, Rick DeCecca. National Business Agent Region 15, Bruce Didrikson. President Emeritus Fred Rolando was unable to attend. He asked me to convey to all of you that he misses you. He wishes he could be here. He is doing great. Fred is still doing whatever it is we need him to do. Most of you are probably aware he is one of our NALCREST trustees and remains involved with NALCREST and whatever else we are doing. So we certainly miss seeing Fred here this weekend, but he asked me to tell you all hello, tell you all thank you for everything that you do for letter carriers, and he looks forward to seeing everyone the next time that we are all together. I want to introduce the staff that you see back behind us, just a handful of staffers that have been instrumental in putting this wrap session together, starting with Chief of Staff Corey Blaylock, Special Executive Assistant to the President Tim McKay, Special Assistant to the President Michelle McQuality, and we have two of our attorneys here with us, Kate Swearingen and Lisa Cott. We also, down in the first few rows, have a lot of letter carriers that work both at our headquarters and in our regional offices, and I'd like to recognize them by group, so I will ask you all to please stand, starting with our regional administrative assistants. Our headquarters staff, which includes letter carriers as well as our professional staff, please stand. Our legislative and political organizers. Regional grievance assistants. Regional workers' compensation assistants. That's a lot of people, isn't it? We need more. As you all know, there's a lot of work to do, but we're very much appreciative of all the work that they do to really, as I said, make our union move. Hopefully, over the course of yesterday and maybe even Friday, at registration, you had the opportunity to stop by and interact with the people at the various booths. We had booths on OWCP, the Mutual Benefit Association, the Disaster Relief Foundation, NALCREST, legislation, our LPOs were there, our emergency response team, and of course the health benefit plan. I want to certainly thank and recognize, even though I think they already left, the staff at the health benefit plan. It's a really important time for our health plan. And over the last several years, really beginning primarily with the pandemic, which was challenging for everyone, but it was particularly challenging in the healthcare and the health insurance business. And since then, we have dealt with implementation of a significant change due to postal reform, and just going into this year, we had to make a really difficult decision, and that decision was to eliminate the federal side of our health benefit plan. But our plan, as we sit here today, that serves postal employees and most importantly, serves letter carriers, is stronger than it's ever been. It's better than it's ever been. It looks excellent, our outlook for the future, and we're excited to be in the middle of open season. And I want to certainly recognize Stephanie and her staff. Frankly, what they've dealt with at the plan the last 5 years has been unprecedented. And as we sit here in this open season, we have a plan that provides the best benefits at the best possible the lowest possible premiums for our members. We've extended our hours, our customer service hours, not just for open season, but permanently. And despite the challenges of the last few years, our plan and the service that we provide to our members has continued to improve. So open season doesn't close tomorrow, doesn't close at the end of this week, but it's going to come really quickly, the end of it. And I know a lot of you have done this already, but I encourage you in the strongest possible terms to get back and encourage your members, educate them, at minimum send them to the website, have them call the plan. Because during this open season, they have an opportunity, if they're not a member of our plan, to do what almost everyone, if not everyone in this room has done. And that's experienced the high quality coverage and service that comes from our plan. Did you enjoy the workshops yesterday? It was a little bit different, but I think very timely, as we'll get into in a few minutes. So yesterday, through those 4 workshops, basically the entire national agreement was covered, with the exception of what we call economic issues that we're going to talk about this morning. And there was opportunity there to dig into all sorts of things and have that interaction with the Executive Council bargaining committees. I will tell you, as a whole, the council members here that participated and put on those presentations yesterday were very, not just encouraged, but grateful for all the interaction and the information that they received that's going to help us continue our work in collective bargaining preparation. So you spent all day doing that yesterday. This morning, we are going to focus on 3 very important issues, 3 challenges that face our union in the immediate and the long-term future. They are very serious. Very serious. Those 3 are as follows. Collective bargaining, which stays at the top of our priority list. We'll discuss the economic piece of collective bargaining and effectively do the same thing in this wrap session this morning for the issues that we consider economic that you did yesterday in these subcommittee rooms. The second is the fight that we've had throughout 2025 and what unfortunately is going to continue into 2026 for the things that we have very often taken for granted. The Postal Service as an independent agency, the right to collectively bargain, the right to collect dues through payroll deduction. So we're going to talk about what's happened in 2025. We really have had to fight like hell. All we have to do is look at the world around us and what's happened to people that have employers, relationships with their employers through their unions that are very similar to ours. They do not sit today where we sit. They sit in places of being attacked, in many cases even gutted. That has not happened to us so far in 2025, and there's a reason for that. So we'll talk about that and what we can look for going forward. And the third thing is the state of our employer, the United States Postal Service. Maybe our first and foremost responsibility is doing what we can do to ensure we have a place to work. The future is not certain in light of recent information that's come out. So we will discuss the present, maybe more importantly, the future. But let's start with collective bargaining. Yesterday, you participated in the workshops. Last night, we recorded an episode of our podcast, the Fight Like Hell podcast, where we had 3 branch presidents that joined us to offer some perspective. That's available in the podcast feed and on YouTube and wherever else. I encourage you to check it out, share it with your members. For those that are not here, it'll give them a little bit of insight into what took place yesterday. We also, a lot of you participated in some little video interviews. We put together an excellent compilation of those, a few-minute video that's kind of similar to what you may be accustomed to seeing at the end of the week at convention. So that'll be out if it's not already on all our social media channels. I encourage you to check those out. I want us to talk about bargaining, really 3 pieces here. The first is this entire process of bargaining preparation. What we've done here this weekend, and we'll do the rest of this morning, is a very important piece of our preparation. The second is the economic piece and the approach in preparation for economics. The third is what will be productive for us to do very much like we did yesterday in this wrap session today. So let's start with this preparation process. Over the years, our union has used a lot of different methods, means of preparation for collective bargaining. In the 15 years I have been directly involved in it, it's changed a lot from the first time I did it in 2011 to now. The basic premise of what we began doing in earnest in early September, really right after Labor Day, is to take the bargaining subcommittees that we have used in the last couple of rounds of bargaining, members of the council, and get them as much information while giving our members as much opportunity as we can to provide that information for them to utilize in forming and drafting proposals that ultimately turn into the things we pass across the table in collective bargaining. Now, on one hand, there's a pretty significant portion of bargaining preparation that never ends, goes on continuously, monitoring the things that impact bargaining, the world around us, the economy, wages in this country, what's going on with the Postal Service. But starting in early September, the week after Labor Day, we began working in these subcommittees. We took every article of the contract, except for the economic stuff, and divided them into 6 different groups. Each executive council member chose which of those 6 groups they wanted to work on, and they began meeting. They have met at least weekly, in most cases more often than that. We have been together to have council meetings and work in subcommittees on average every 2 or 3 weeks since the beginning of September. They began by reviewing things like our official bargaining positions, national agreement resolutions that have been adopted by our conventions over the years, reviewing things that we have previously proposed in collective bargaining and not achieved, reviewing the contracts of other unions, to sometimes that can trigger an idea of something we may want to do. And of course, they all bring their own experiences and what they are hearing and what they see to the table. And that started immediately. And we've done that sort of work for several rounds of bargaining. But we wanted to provide them more information. The first piece of this was in mid-September. We had a group of letter carriers, 30 of them, that we called a rank and file committee, come to the Washington, D.C. area and spend a week basically replicating the work that the council members were doing to get their input from different perspectives on the different topics that we had assigned each article to the Executive Council subcommittees. There were 30. We divided them into 3 groups within that 30, 3 groups of 10. One group was branch leaders. One group were people that have a significant amount of experience in the grievance arbitration procedure and, of course, therefore, a lot of familiarity with the national agreement. And then another group of younger, less experienced, though very active members that we simply call newer members because we couldn't figure out and still can't figure out. They couldn't even figure out a better name for them. So they came in for a week and spent blocks of time, working on each of these topics, reviewing much of the same information the council members had reviewed. And they came up with some of their own concepts. On the economic front, we had excellent discussion with them about priorities, which we'll get into a little bit more later on. That information that we took from them was then compiled and provided to our council members and their subcommittees as just another bit of input. I want to recognize there's too many of you to name. but the 30 of you that were here in September or were in D.C. in September for the Rank and File Committee, those of you that are in this room, would you please stand? Give those guys a round of applause. They did a phenomenal job. We're going to do that again with 30 other people in January, but I'll get to that in just a minute. The next piece of information is polling. First off, there's a difference in terms of what I'm about to talk about between polling and surveys. So we're going to start with polling. Polling is something we do fairly often. You're probably most familiar with the idea of polling for what we see for political races. It's where you get a professional pollster. That pollster reaches out to members until they reach certain thresholds of responses from certain demographics and geographics and whatever the case may be, to provide polling results that are representative of the membership. That was conducted. The information was compiled just this week with the council. We went over kind of the results of that information, primarily focused on economic stuff and the prioritization of different economic issues. Of course, the timing of this national RAP session in November in this process is really important. The value in what we did yesterday, the value in what we're doing today, to hear from you, our branch and state leaders, about your view on bargaining priorities and your view on certain ways to do certain things. There's more than one way to accomplish a lot of our goals. Is an incredibly valuable piece of our collective bargaining preparation. We are going to, over the next several weeks, provide a survey. In this case, the difference between a poll and a survey, polling's done by a professional. They only have to reach a limited number of responses. A survey is going to be made available to all of our active members to participate in. It's something that will be available for a period of time, several weeks probably, to give people ample opportunity to participate in that. And as we move further into January, we, as I said, will have another session of a rank and file bargaining committee. The primary reason we haven't distributed or put out any of the information or the conclusions, if you want to use that word, that our rank and file committee from September drew is we don't want to spoil the minds of the 30 that are coming in January. It'll be really interesting to see how what that group comes up with, going through the same in-depth exercise, differs, if it does, from what the group in September came up with. All of this information will be used to, by the end of January, our subcommittees of the Executive Council will have finalized the drafts of their proposals for bargaining. On the same track, there is no subcommittee for the economic piece. The reason for that is we deal with the economic piece and discuss it in the same ways these subcommittees discuss topics as an entire council. Our last few council meetings, we have spent blocks of time in each meeting talking about the economic side of bargaining. We spent quite a bit of time talking about it just Thursday afternoon and Friday morning right here in Cleveland. And that will continue. The polling piece was an important piece of information for economic considerations. Of course, the information such as official bargaining positions. The Rank and File Committee, which we haven't even gotten to yet with the council, had their thoughts on different priorities. We talked about the polling. The surveys are coming. And right here this morning will be an excellent opportunity for us to hear from you. I think one of the questions that has to be answered, though, when it comes to the economic piece is what is the most productive way for us internally to prepare? And I want to just give you a little bit of insight into the type of conversations we as a council have. It's not about what our goals are. I think everyone in this room and almost every letter carrier, I guess there may be an exception somewhere, pretty much universally understands the things economically that we want to achieve in bargaining. Everybody wants higher general wage increases. Everybody wants cost of living increases that are paid 100% at every step. Everybody wants higher starting pay, higher top pay, higher pay in the middle of the pay scale. We want to get to the top step faster, shorten the pay table. An all-career workforce. We'd like to completely ban subcontracting. It's not a deep thought exercise for all of us in this room who spend our daily lives working on these issues, enforcing the agreement, thinking about this, hearing from our members. It's not a deep thought exercise for us to list the things we want to achieve. So that's not really the exercise, because that's not something that there's much debate among people in this room. This is what the exercise should be. When it comes to the economic stuff, it's number one, how do we prioritize the economic goals that we have? And secondly, how do we do that in a way or keeping in mind the things that have always worked really well for us? If you look in the history of our bargaining, regardless of the specifics of one agreement to the next, something in the entire modern era of bargaining that we have done as a union very well is any economic package that's been included in an agreement that was negotiated or an agreement that was achieved through interest arbitration has had a very balanced benefit on all of our members, regardless of where they are in their careers. So when we go into forming opinions or our own personal ideas about prioritization, of course everyone naturally comes with looking through their own lens. If you ask a letter carrier that was hired a year ago, they're likely going to have very strong feelings about the earlier part of the pay scale and the time it takes to get to top step. If you ask a letter carrier that's been around for 20 years, of course they're going to first go to the biggest pay increase they can get or doing something at top step. And I really want to shout out and recognize the rank and file committee. You saw them stand. That in the discussions we had with them, there was a lot of passion about different pieces of the economic puzzle. Often that passion came through their own experiences or maybe their peers or maybe the majority of the people that work in their station or a particular group in their branch, whatever it may be. But what we have done so well historically to balance was reflected in the room in discussions with them, where they came to this conversation feeling very strongly and passionate about a particular piece of the economic puzzle, if you want to call it that, while understanding the reason and the benefit for having something that's balanced, that benefits our members no matter where they are in the pay table. So as we continue to do what we did yesterday and a little while on the economic front, I encourage you to think about, number one, the priorities. What are the things that are most important? And as we think about those things, consider what's the best way to achieve a particular goal. For example, everyone would like for us to be able to get to top step quicker, whether that's a letter carrier that's in the middle of the pay table right now or at the beginning. There's a lot of ways to get there. Think of the past. We've had agreements like we did in 2016, where those that served as transitional employees, depending on how much time they served, there was a formula to give them step credit and advance them. That's one possibility. Do something like that with CCA time. Another possibility is to just simply let people advance a step one time and maintain step credit. Another possibility is to lessen the number of steps, or maybe even keep the number of steps, or potentially even add steps, but shorten the waiting periods between steps. So every one of these economic pieces, there's a lot of ways to get there. Consider the pros and cons of each as you think through them. And consider the value and benefit to our members. One example that's come up in discussion, kind of a natural place that lands, is often doing something significant to increase starting pay or pay early in the pay table, and further increasing pay beyond whatever general increases or COLAs are there at the top end of the pay table. And it's certainly not one versus the other, but it is a good way to consider the value and the benefit. So just for the sake of example, not to draw any conclusion one way or the other, but for thought process. If an all-career workforce is negotiated, and we look at our members that are there right now, whether that is everyone converts immediately, everyone converts, a year from now, we slowly shrink it, we go down to a period of less than 2 years to convert to career. There's all sorts of different ways to get there. But if someone, let's just say, hypothetically, converts after 6 months, and everyone converts after being non-career for 6 months, you've certainly got a number of people that have been CCAs for longer than 6 months that are going to convert to career quicker than they otherwise would if you bargain that. Which means they get to career quicker. They make more money, they get benefits. It also means that whatever period of time they gain, so to speak, to get to career quicker, they're going to, for that equivalent period of time, be in a higher step all the way until they get to step P when you look out the pay table. You can assign an actual value to that. It has a limited duration. It certainly helps them in the short term. You compare that to potentially adding more money to top step. One might be $50,000, and the other over the course of a career might be hundreds of thousands of dollars. These are sort of the ways we have to think through these things. So when you start thinking through the details of them like this, and even in discussions with the Postal Service, the prioritization piece that we've talked about quite a bit as a council, we'll talk about in here this morning, is really important. Because you never know exactly how bargaining is going to play out. It takes twists and it takes turns. And the better sense we have about priorities, what's more impactful from a numbers perspective in terms of that benefit and value, as well as from the members of our union, which you, as the leadership of our branches and state associations, really have the pulse of, is valuable as we navigate the negotiation process. So, in a little while, as we get to the wrap part of this, I encourage you to think about priorities. No one in this room has to be convinced letter carriers should be paid more, or any of those other things that I talked about earlier. It's a matter of how do we prioritize them, and that helps us as a council figure out how to get there. I want to shift gears now and talk about 2025 and what's happened so far. We, in February, had an event at our building where we kicked off a campaign and kind of a branding of Fight Like Hell, where we wore red t-shirts and much like what you see behind us. Y'all look great in black, by the way. And the reason we did that is we knew there were fights coming. Results of the election told us there were fights coming. What we expected and had seen from the incoming administration in relation to the Postal Service, and there was uncertainty there, knowing this nasty thing, at least nasty when you have a Republican-controlled Congress, called budget reconciliation was going to happen. We were going to be on the chopping block. When we kicked that off in mid-February, we knew there would be a fight. We didn't know exactly how fast it would come or where it would come from first. As it turns out, it did not take very long. In fact, about a week after that, we found out one Thursday afternoon that the administration was imminently going to issue an executive order to make drastic, arguably illegal, changes to the Postal Service, to get rid of the governance, to get rid of the regulatory body, to move it from its status as an independent agency under the Department of Commerce. Later that night, there was a news report from the Washington Post that confirmed everything that we had heard. Talking to the leadership at the Postal Service at the time, many of them had just resigned to the fact, I'll give you a quote, I won't tell you from who, they're going to destroy this great institution. And there's nothing we can do about it. To which I responded, bullshit. So we very quickly, immediately, considered what are the best, most impactful ways for us to influence this. Primary tool was going to our Republican friends on Capitol Hill to push back quietly. You're not going to hear them do it publicly because they're, I don't know if you know this, but most of them anyway, are a little bit fearful of the White House. But to push back to say, number one, I support the Postal Service. The people in my district rely on the Postal Service, and if you destroy it, that's going to hurt me politically. That happened almost immediately. That was on Thursday. On Friday, we put out a call to action to our members, the most active membership of any union in this country. That call to action was to call the Speaker of the House and let him know this was a terrible idea and they need to tell the White House not to do it. And everybody called. They shut his phone line down in the Capitol. Come Monday, we had a large event, a rally in Washington, D.C. We had over 1,000 people there. A lot of you in this room were there and came on short notice. And the reason we had that event was to do something that's an important part of us pushing back. And that is when something like this is imminent, create media coverage to educate the public, to raise public awareness. We also used digital campaigns, if you want to call it that, to raise public awareness. And as we went through that 4 or 5 day stretch, there was a period, they planned to do it on that Friday at 3 o'clock. They did not do it. They then planned to do it on the Monday, issue the executive order on Monday at 5 o'clock. It did not happen. And it was all because of the pushback that we as a union, both in D.C., every one of you in this room and all of our members, generated in a very compressed period of time. And there's one thing that a lot of you heard me say this back when this was happening over this month, really the whole month of March as it turned out. I said what the Postal Service, kind of their reaction to this was. They gave up, basically. So did everybody else. Everybody else depended on us. Nobody else has the influence, nobody else has the resources, certainly nobody else has the activism and the numbers of members that we do. To be sure that they got the message, we did something on March 23rd of that year that is unprecedented in the history of our union. We had 300 rallies on the same day around the country to generate local media coverage and raise public awareness about protecting the Postal Service. I know you all had rallies. Some of you had them just in your branches. Several branches got together. It was an awesome day and something that we're likely going to use going forward in other areas. But make no mistake, the influence of the private shippers and those that have an interest in the Postal Service failing was extremely strong early in this administration. And it certainly hasn't gone away. But not only did we stop what was planned, imminently planned at the end of February, but we have continued to push back on any sort of idea that's come up. But we have to watch. We have to be mindful, because that influence, again, from those that have an interest in the Postal Service failing, mostly those that want our business, or they want the business that they want, is not going away. We also had a Postmaster General, Louis DeJoy, that was forced out by the White House. This is a Postmaster General that had deep ties to Republican politics. This is a Postmaster General that knows the President personally. And you might say, why would they want him out? Typically, this administration, those that have aligned with him politically in the past, particularly financially, gains favor. The opposite was true here. The simple reason is that during his time as Postmaster General, while we have a lot of issues with many of the things that then Postmaster General DeJoy did, primarily service, one of the things he did was made some tough decisions about contracts with private shippers. And the decisions he made were to do what's best for the Postal Service, not for those private shippers. That got them very upset. This illustrates the power of the influence of corporate America, and in our case, corporate America in the shipping industry, our competitors, forced out this PMG. So we have a new PMG now. The process of selecting the current PMG, our Board of Governors, who's responsible for selecting the PMG, engaged a large search firm and did this in a way, at least to start with, that most corporate boards would do, to search for a new CEO or leader of whatever type. As time went on through their search, they narrowed their search, and Postmaster General Steiner, obviously, because of his past experience, is very qualified for the job. But he had a discussion with the White House, and the White House told our board to select him as PMG. It's the first time in history a Postmaster General has come to the Postal Service directly from a Postal Service competitor. PMG Steiner was on the board of FedEx for over a decade. He's been Postmaster General since the middle of July, and overall has made very few changes, outside of some structural management changes at headquarters that are pretty minor and not noticeable to really anybody. Publicly, he has said the right things. Privately, he has said the right things. But we still are in a little bit of a wait-and-see mode. The obvious concern for me is not about his capability. He's a very intelligent guy. He's a very successful executive. Certainly is capable of leading the Postal Service and leading it well. The concern is more in the way he was selected. That if he wants to do the right thing in a particular situation, and he is pressured by the White House to do something different, what will he do? We shall see. There's also the United States Congress where we've had to fight. I mentioned budget reconciliation and the process this last spring and summer to pass a one big beautiful bill. I don't hear many people call it that anymore. Honestly, was a fight on Capitol Hill that was unique. Certainly a fight that was more intense than any fight in the 15 years I've been at NALC headquarters. There were proposals to reduce our retirement benefits to make us pay more for them. The House initially passed a version of the bill that included eliminating the special annuity supplement for first retirees. For those that retire before you're eligible to draw Social Security, you're paid a supplement until you are. Our friends in the House, Republicans, many of them that voted yes on that bill, as you might imagine, I was not particularly thrilled with them. They said, look, they give us a 3,000-page bill. We thought it was all out of there. They only give us an hour to read it. They're probably telling the truth, but they voted for the bill nonetheless. So the House passes their version of the bill, and it's going over to the Senate. And we got these Republican friends that voted for this bill to write a letter to Leader Thune and say, we voted for this bill, but you got to take this out of it. Over on the Senate side, the committee that has jurisdiction is chaired by Chairman Rand Paul. He's a tough character for everybody. He hates everything, including letter carriers, Postal Service. His father-in-law's a rural carrier, still hates us. Probably hates his father-in-law, I don't know. So Chairman Paul, who has already said he was voting no on the bill no matter what. So you got a chairman making text for a bill that he's already said he's voting no on no matter what. He doesn't put that piece in about eliminating the special annuity supplement. He puts some language in the bill about making the Postal Service give back money that was appropriated for electric vehicles and to auction off all the electric vehicles and electric vehicle infrastructure, which is ridiculous. Get that cut out. Now we're kind of on the last week of the bill, and Senator Paul's last bit of text that he tries to throw in doesn't have an eliminating the special annuity supplement. It doesn't have this stupid postal vehicle thing and taking the money back. But it has language to increase our retirement contributions to more than double them. Kind of at the last minute on the Senate side, we're able to get that removed from the bill. Senate passes a bill, the bill goes back to the House, it passes the House. This piece of legislation has a lot of budgetary items and changes from previous budgets that probably the vast majority of us in this room would have very strong disagreement with. Many of the social programs that were included and assistance programs for food and Medicaid and all those things. What this bill does not have, though, is anything that harms postal employees by reducing, cutting our retirement benefits or making us pay more for them. We've also had to closely monitor efforts to apply many of the things that we've seen other federal employees have to deal with to the Postal Service. Legislation has been introduced in the Senate that would prohibit the Postal Service from collecting dues through union dues through payroll deduction. That's happened in all the other federal agencies. It's resulted in our brothers and sisters in the other federal unions losing anywhere from a third to half or more of their dues-paying members. In the White House's budget proposal that was released in the summer, it proposed extending the application of an executive order from the first Trump administration that disallowed official time, prohibited agencies from granting what we know as steward time to union officials. The budget proposal was to eliminate steward time from the Postal Service. Now, that bill in the Senate is dead on arrival in this Congress. That budget proposal is not going to happen anytime in the near future. That language would not be included. But it's a clear intention of where a lot of people in power want to go with the Postal Service. The combination of it has actually happened at every other federal agency, and the fact that there's been legislation, concrete budget proposals to do the same thing at the Postal Service puts it on our radar. We have monitored outreach and, not to us, exploration by some of the root of our collective bargaining rights, legal case for or against them, which we obviously think is strong. But as we've seen with this administration, the approach has often been throw a lot of stuff against the wall and half of it sticks. That's good. There's also been a concerted effort to utilize the court system to attempt to consolidate power. And while I suppose this has also been the case, it seems the judicial system in this country, in many cases, becomes more about the judge that you happen to draw and which president nominated that judge than the merits of the case, unfortunately. So we have to ensure that we are prepared for any outcome we can reasonably expect. The current state of affairs in Washington, D.C., on Capitol Hill, the White House, the Postal Service itself, which we'll get to in a minute, means there's a pretty broad range of outcomes, unfortunately. And we have to be prepared for them all. So we have invested significantly in terms of time and resources into legal preparation to ensure that if any of this type of action was taken, we are prepared to virtually immediately respond legally, to prepare for the potential financial implications, even if short-term, while in a legal battle, as well as how that translates to our duty to represent. Because when those other unions that represent federal employees, all of which we are close with, they no longer have steward time or official time, they call it. Their dues can no longer be withheld through payroll deduction, but they still have the very same obligation to represent their members that we have. How that would be done, even if it's for a few days or a couple of weeks, is a contingency that we've planned for. I tell you this not to try to insert fear in any way, but just to illustrate the environment that we're in. And to let you know that we are prepared. But despite all the things that we have had come at us, whether on Capitol Hill or through the administration in 2025, we've been successful. As I said, we sit here today, compared to a lot of our brothers and sisters, unharmed by the actions of this administration. That is because the influence of our union in the legislative and political arena and in government affairs in general is larger than it's ever been before. There's no better example to me than what we just dealt with budget reconciliation. 12 years ago, we had a Democratic president, a split Congress, and a federal budget that was passed and signed into law by the president that increased retirement contributions for future hired letter carriers more than 5 times what it was for those hired before. In 2025, we have a Republican-led House and Senate, a Republican administration, and the largest, most aggressive budget reconciliation legislation in the history of our country. And we came through this without being harmed in any way. We were proud to fight not just for our members, but to lead the way in ensuring that all those other federal employees, our brothers and sisters that have been hurt throughout the course of 2025, they were not experiencing the same thing. Our union is more active in every single state legislatively, in every congressional district. We cover more ground and more people and have deeper bipartisan relationships both in D.C. and locally than we ever have before. Our Letter Care Political Fund has never been bigger. In the ever-evolving way that government operates, it's more transactional now than it's ever been before. We maximize the value of our Letter Care Political Fund money in the way we spend it. We should be proud of, appreciative of, and celebrate the battles that we've won in 2025. Because they're all of us together, not just us in D.C., not just locally in district, all of us together. But more importantly, we have to push to continue to grow our influence long term. We've evolved so much in the last 12 years or so in our legislative and political network. That evolution has to continue growing our influence, because it's not getting any easier. We have a huge opportunity in front of us with the Letter Care Political Fund. We're at the point of testing the new process for payroll allotments with the Postal Service. It was included in the 2023 collective bargaining agreement. That's going to create a massive opportunity, because the process of actually signing up to become a contributor through payroll deduction is going to get a whole lot easier and quicker. And we've talked for some time now that we have to be prepared for that. Part of that preparation is continuing to invest and grow the folks that from our headquarters work out in the field, our legislative and political organizers. We've just recently added 2 additional ones, and we are going to add more soon. And their primary responsibility is going to shift a little bit to be more focused on providing resources for our branches and state associations to educate our members about the importance of the Letter Care Political Fund. It is a simple truth. The more money that is in our PAC, the better chance we have at defending any attack that comes our way in Washington, D.C. We don't have to like it. Most of us don't, but that's how it works. And when we compare ourselves to a lot of the money that floats around in the campaign finance world, we're actually righteous. Many times it's billionaires filtering corporate money. But really what our PAC does is representative of what makes unions strong. You take a little bit from a whole lot of people to create a collective strength and influence. And our LPOs, there will be more of them. They will, of course, still attend events, but they're going to be there to help you more in the day-to-day at the branch and state level. We also want to continue to provide as much in terms of resources and assistance as we can for our state associations with the structures that are in place with our letter care congressional liaisons or LICLs to continue to better develop those relationships at the local level. Because when our influence is the strongest, is when members of Congress, regardless of which party, the relationship at the local level and the relationship in D.C. both match. To do this, I'm excited, or to further this, I'm excited to tell you about a couple of other recent changes that we made. Recently, a few months ago, we hired a new Director of Legislative and Political Affairs, Paul Schwartz. I don't know where he is. Say hello, Paul. Stand up. He's probably way over there somewhere. Oh, he's already standing up. He's in the back. Paul served in a very similar position for the National Rural Letter Carers Association for about 20 years. So he has very deep contacts. He's someone's been a friend and we worked closely with for a long time. So it has been totally seamless for him to jump in. Additionally, I have decided to create, I guess you'd say, a new position and called a Special Assistant to the President for Legislative and Political Affairs, and I guess now former LPO out on the West Coast, John Beaumont, has filled that position. And really due to John's experience as a state chair and certainly his time as an LPO is pretty uniquely qualified and suited to work very heavily in the legislative side of things and be an excellent resource for all of our state associations, and in particular our state presidents in building that influence. As I mentioned in the opening, a big part of the opening of this section, a big part of what we did back in February and March was public awareness type stuff, rallies, media engagement, traditional media, social media, digital media, some stuff that's not visible, that's targeted in certain areas. It's just sort of the whole new world that we live in. As we progress into next year, we have to continuously balance the need to actually launch a large campaign like that with ensuring that if we're not launching it immediately, we are ready to launch it should something happen. And as we continue the efforts to grow our PAC, a renewed focus and more resources on our state associations, we intend to incorporate as much as we possibly can, on top of the traditional things that we've always done, to begin to layer in the ways that we can utilize tools like that at the state level, at the branch level. A lot of you in this room, as I look around, I see faces, you already do this. But it's the way the world's moving, and it's an important piece of what we need to incorporate into our efforts. On to the third thing. And this is new. It's new in the sense that me bringing this up is triggered by the fact that the Postal Service last week released its financial results for fiscal year 2025. For the fiscal year that ran, in this case, from October 1st, 2024, October 1st, 2024 to September 30th, 2025. The Postal Service lost $9 billion. To be very honest about it, that number is lower than what we expected. In 2024, the Postal Service lost $9.5 billion. In 2023, they lost $6 billion. So I'm going to dig into these numbers a little bit, because certainly the bottom line is ultimately the most important number. But to shape our work in the present and the future, it's important for us to understand the details here. Last year, the loss of $9 billion, the reason the loss went up from 2023 to 2024 by $3+ billion is primarily attributed to workers' comp cost. The Postal Service's, the impact on their bottom line over the course of a year when it comes to workers' comp cost is fairly heavily influenced by interest rates. It went up because they had to pay $2-something billion in workers' comp. This year, in 2025, it was less than we thought it was going to be because they had a positive impact from workers' comp because of what's happened with interest rates. There are a few things that are very concerning. Number one, for fiscal year 2025, their controllable loss. So the things that they operationally have control over increased by 50% over the previous year. It was $1.4 billion last year. It was $2.7 billion this year. The total loss the last 3 years, as I mentioned, is $25 billion. When we go back and look at every single year, back to the recession, so 2010 forward, it's the largest loss in a 3-year period that doesn't include the pre-funding payments that they had to make for so long, or went on their books even if they didn't make the payments. So why is this happening in terms of this controllable loss? So as we all know, the Postal Service has a universal service obligation. It's one of our strengths. It's our network. It's something we have long fiercely advocated to protect anytime somebody even thought about trying to attack it. But there are facts here that are important. The number of deliveries that we make increases by about 2 million every year. Mail volume continues to decline. There's one particular area that's in decline that's very concerning. But when mail volume declines, revenue declines. So we have more delivery points to deliver less mail and therefore less revenue. Total volume has declined by almost 4% in the last year, and 49% since 2006, the year of peak volume. We have half as much mail by piece in 2025 as we did in 2006. First class mail annual volume this last year is 7 billion pieces less than it was in 1970. In 1970, the population of America was about 200 million people. The population today is over 340 million. We have the most delivery points we've ever had. The number is over 170 million right now. In 2007, on average, we delivered 5.5 pieces of mail per delivery. Today, that's 2.4 pieces. So the Postal Service over the last decade or so now, the primary decision they have made in terms of money and payments and trying to maintain cash and things like that has been to default on retirement contributions. And I'm going to get in and explain the impact of this, but I want to say this up front because it's important to say. I am by no means saying that they made a mistake in choosing not to make these payments. And we'll get into that a little bit more later. Since 2014, they've defaulted on $32 billion worth of payments into their retirement accounts. Just simply not made them. The reason they were able to not make them is in 2010, our CSRS and FERS pension accounts were over 100% funded. So, of course, the recession hits. You have to make very difficult financial decisions. You're going to prioritize the things that hopefully are most important. Paying employees, paying immediate benefits, operating. And they chose not to pay long-term costs for funds that were already overfunded. That was in 2010. Today, the Civil Service Retirement account is 64% funded. The FERS retirement account is 74% funded. The $9 billion loss this year would be significantly higher if they had not defaulted on these payments. The payment into the CSRS account, amortization payment, this year would have been $3.2 billion. They didn't make that payment. They did make a $1.5 billion payment into the FERS account, and the total would have been $2.2 billion. So they effectively have paid a very low percentage into the retirement accounts over the last decade plus, which has resulted in the funding levels of those accounts going down. Now, there's a lot of money in those accounts, hundreds of billions of dollars still. No one's retirement benefits are in any immediate danger. However, not making those payments is a little bit like kicking a can down the road. Eventually, they have to be made. By 2032, absent some legislative action, which I'll get to in a minute, the total amortization payments for the retirement accounts that the Postal Service will have to make at that point or they are going to get into a pretty precarious situation. We project in 2032 that amount will be $18 billion. They paid none this year. And 2032 is not that far away. One of the impacts of the funding levels of the accounts going down is that it lessens the benefit of legislative policy reforms that we have long fought for and continue to fight for. Most of you in this room are familiar with something we've been working on since Darrell Issa was a good guy, a long time ago, that we commonly call implementing the Siegel method, where OPM would be told to recalculate the obligation that the Postal Service has for retirements. The issue comes down to pre-1970, post-1970, the allocation between the independent postal service we have today and the Post Office Department. The result of that recalculation would be that it would mean that the funds were significantly overfunded, which triggers a transfer of money into the Retiree Health Trust Fund. Well, the size of that transfer into the Retiree Health Trust Fund, if this had been recalculated when these things were already 100% funding by the wrong methodology, the overpayment would be significant, or overfunding would be significant. As funding levels have gone down, once you recalculate it, the amount of money that would result in overfunding and therefore be transferred into the retirement accounts gets less and less and less. The Postal Service has set aside over the years billions of dollars for retiree health care. They have been using that money for years to pay for retiree health care. Those funds are going to run out soon, in just a few years, where they will have to make those payments every year as they go. Combine this with the competition that we face. I talked about how much our mail volume has gone down, how much our revenue has gone down. The vast majority of that revenue growth over the years has been parcels. Somewhere in the 40 to 45% range of our revenue comes from competitive products. So it's more important than ever that we compete. We've seen pretty steady growth, as basically every parcel shipper has, in parcels over the last couple of decades. But there's something in these 2025 financial results that's very concerning. And that is that parcel volume from 24 to 25 was down by 400 million pieces. That's a 6% drop from last year. Parcel volume had grown between 2023 and 2024. In 2020, the Postal Service had a 38% market share of parcel delivery. Now that number is down to about 31%. Competition is increasing. Everybody in this room has seen the volume impact in a lot of different locations of Amazon's continued aggressive work to build out its own delivery network. In 2024, Amazon delivered 6.3 billion parcels. Our volume was 6.8 billion this year. We don't know Amazon's 2025 numbers, but there's a pretty strong chance that Amazon, for the first time this year, will deliver more parcels than the Postal Service. The Postal Service's cash reserves are being depleted because they're in this position of it being absolutely necessary to invest in modernizing our processing and delivery network, but there's not money to invest. They ended this year with a little over $8 billion in cash, liquid assets to spend on what is needed. It was $14 billion last year. So it's gone down by $6 billion. Historically, the way the Postal Service has invested in its infrastructure is by utilizing its $15 billion line of credit with the Treasury Department. That $15 billion line of credit is maxed out because the Postal Service has had to use it through this financial difficulty to, in many cases, fund operations or immediate benefit payments. All of this stuff on one hand is not foreign to us. Postal Service has lost a lot of money over the last decade and a half. But it is different. The circumstances are different. And as we'll talk about in a minute, the path forward is not clear. It's wise when we get this sort of news and dig into it and discuss it in rooms like this. I think it's often wise for us to look at international examples of others that have been through similar circumstances. So there's a lot of examples out there around the world. There's a lot of posts worldwide that are dealing with not exactly the same issues, but similar issues. Issues such as having a universal service obligation like we do and looking to change it because they have decided it was not sustainable. We see changes in delivery frequency, slowing the speed of delivery. Some locations are only delivering to certain geographic areas. Eliminating certain things from the USO. The one thing that's common, and I'm going to talk about a couple specific examples in a minute, but the one thing that is common is these changes result in nearly every time service that worsens, jobs that worsen, and cuts in jobs. Australia, Norway, and Sweden now only deliver to each address every other day. Brazil and Italy have decided to do less frequent delivery in rural areas than they do in urban areas. The Netherlands decided to close half their post offices. But there's a couple here that I want to dig a little deeper into. One is Canada Post and our brothers and sisters with CUPW, the Canadian Union of Postal Workers. Canada Post suffered financial losses for several consecutive years, beginning in 2018. Early this year, the Canadian government bailed them out. But the losses continued throughout the year. So they put together a review commission in Canada, and they decided that it was insolvent. In September, the government announced drastic cuts to do things like end door delivery, lift a moratorium on closing rural post offices, and laying off workers. Our brothers and sisters with CUPW have been in negotiations with Canada Post for 2 years. They've had strikes on and off. They immediately called a strike after the announcement of these cuts. But they're in a place now where they're not bargaining with the company, the independent Canada Post. They're effectively bargaining with the government. And their strikes, for the most part, have been ineffective. You could even argue that they may not have helped the situation at all. So after just a few years of the type of losses that we've experienced, they've seen draconian changes that have harmed the services that were offered as well as their union. Maybe the most extreme example of this is Denmark. Letter volume in Denmark has dropped by 90% in the last 25 years. A lot of that for the same reasons that we've seen letter volume decrease. The diversion of first-class mail by email and other electronic means. But they've also gone to a system where all the official transactions with the government are performed electronically. While we do not have something like that in the United States as of now, it's not very far-fetched when we look at what's happened through much of the industries and government that provided a lot of mail volume in years past. So PostNord is the name of the post office in Denmark. And earlier this year, they announced that they would cease all letter delivery by the end of the year. They're not going to deliver any more letters. They are removing every collection box from the streets, and they are laying off 1/3 of their workforce. Their union's primary fear, aside from the obvious, is that the postal service in their country is effectively moving to gig jobs, and that their collective bargaining days are numbered. None of these are apples-to-apples comparisons, but they show us how different governments, different styles of governments, governments of different political persuasions and leanings have reacted to difficult situations. Now, on the positive side, I think it's absolutely true that Americans value things like door delivery, 6-day delivery, their letter carriers, more than anywhere else in the world. I think it's also reasonable to conclude that the amount that the people of this country value things like door delivery and 6-day delivery is probably not where it once was, because there is so much less reliance on the mail. It's reflected by mail volume. So it's still a strength for us, and it's still a tool. But we have to look at what happens with our brothers and sisters in other countries to factor into whatever plans we make for the future. So let's talk about the future. One of the big things that is different now than all the years past, really since the recession, is that in each of those years, despite significant losses, we always had a relatively clear path forward. We had the pre-funding mandate to address legislatively. We had the growth in parcel volume that was continuing. Now that path forward is not so clear. There are absolutely policy changes that need to be enacted legislatively. Implementation of the Siegel Report, allowing the Postal Service to better invest their retirement funds. Those two things alone will not solve our problems. They must be done, and they will buy valuable time and money to make investment to modernize our infrastructure. But the Postal Service's business model must change. Modernization was ignored for years, primarily by PMG's Donahoe and Brennan, who rather than choosing a modernize or a growth strategy, adopted more of a shrink to survive strategy. Slashing mail processing capacity, attempting to do things like 5-day delivery, eliminating door delivery. Postmaster General DeJoy tried to catch up, tried to modernize, but he tried to do about 20 years worth in 3 months. Too much, too fast. And in his plans, I think the biggest criticism all of us in this room would likely have of Postmaster General DeJoy and his big picture plans is the lack of emphasis and neglect of service, the degradation of service that we saw over the last few years. As I said earlier, Postmaster General Steiner has not really stepped out in any strong direction, aside from saying he is in favor of modernization. So it remains to be seen exactly which direction he is going to look to go. Recently, there have been reports of a deal with UPS to resume last mile delivery was done. The Postal Service and we are certainly a valuable commodity making last mile deliveries, as long as we are appropriately paid to make those deliveries. So we shall see about Postmaster General Steiner. The Postal Service in the future, it must modernize. It is a proven fact over the last few years that the current way of business, it's not sustainable. Our infrastructure is outdated. Our current processing and delivery networks cannot meet the service needs of our customers. Think of every time we have to wait on mail. This investment is sorely needed. Investment in the infrastructure physically, investment in the employees, in us. But the challenge is where to get the resources to invest. Any future Postal Service, we have to maximize the value of our universal network. It's the biggest strength that we have. The competitive advantages that we have had over the years, many of them have eroded to competitors like Amazon. But there is one place where we can and we must create a competitive advantage, and that is service. We have to offer the highest quality service. So, brothers and sisters, there is real, legitimate reason for us to have long-term concern about the sustainability of the Postal Service as we know it. But the more immediate danger is the opportunities that this current financial situation and the things that we can project in the near future creates for those that push for action like privatization, slashing benefits legislatively, a tax on things like FICA and our workers' compensation benefits. So while we work to develop long-term answers, we have to keep in mind that when bad things, bad outlooks happen, such as what was released last week, it opens doors for those that want to take advantage of the situation. So what do we do going forward here? We continue to advocate for the policy changes that we need, just like we have for many years. Implementation of the Siegel report, giving the Postal Service the ability to invest the retirement funds that they've set aside. We keep pushing the Postal Service on service improvements and smart investment in modernization as they can afford to do it. And then we have to be part of developing what the Postal Service's business looks like in the future. Of course, for us, a business model that values letter carriers, protects our jobs, is of utmost importance and at the top of the list. So in the near future, we are going to put together a group of members of our union to bring different perspectives together to explore, from a letter carrier's perspective, a business plan. This is going to be an ongoing conversation for a while, because there's no silver bullet here. But it's real, and it's part of the big challenges that face us going forward. I talked about our bargaining preparation and really everything through January 31st. We officially opened collective bargaining on February the 25th. It's just a ceremonial, stupid, waste of time thing where we, make some little speech and take pictures. But that's when it officially starts. And earlier I talked about what we did in terms of a campaign of raising public awareness back in March on the issue of the administration looking to harm the Postal Service. We are going to do a very similar comprehensive campaign related to collective bargaining early next year. It'll include actions. It'll likely include digital pieces like we've used in the past. A day of action that we will do nationally. We will have a date for that pretty soon here, and information out for everyone to get materials and t-shirts and signs and messaging and all that stuff. The public supports us in virtually everything we do. We have to be strategic about letting them know what's going on and how that can help us. So more to come. There will be a National Day of Action. There'll be plenty of opportunities for everyone to get involved. I know all of you who came here to participate also have a lot of your own responsibilities at home and are busy representing your members, and I just want to appreciate you for what you do for our members every day and for what you've done here over the last couple of days. Thank you all very much. Travel home safe. Have a happy Thanksgiving.